inside each of us, you, all of us, me too, we have a treasure. It's a treasure we're born with. It's ours by all rights. But most of us rarely get to use it. And when we do, it's absolutely exhilarating in a kind of excruciating way. It's called creativity. And it's a part, perhaps the heart, of who we are. It's a treasure so elemental, it belongs in the periodic table. When a community has art making as an active force, it builds social capital, trust, and resilience. It's also economical, sustainable, and fun. Well, most of the time. Brilliant artists and people all over the country and the world have been bringing the arts into prisons, into schools, into social justice movements for economic development. The invitation I am offering today is to actually bring creative engagement into the very practice of government. And I've had the pleasure and challenge of doing exactly that for the last 7 years in City Hall, in my office, and out in those mean streets of Portland. When I came, they were like, I'm from the Lower East Side for 37 years, and when I came, they were like, well, there's the urban issues, and I was like, Marty, just listen. Just listen. And it's true. I was just driving yesterday, and I was like, no, it's really true. So I'm glad I just listened. So can this work? How might this work? Did it work? Would it work? I got 3 examples of working, and a friend said to me, just mention that there are failures along with the triumphs. And I said, okay, note well taken. Homeland Security began my relationship with Maine and with Portland. It was an original play commissioned by Center for Cultural Exchange, and it ended up revealing the profound and dramatic impacts of a post-9/11 world in Portland, Maine, on individuals. And I spent a year here, 1 week a month, collecting stories, interviews, and workshops. And then the people themselves that I interviewed found the courage to actually tell the stories themselves with what I had put together, including then Mayor Jill Doosan and the State Senate President, Beth Edmonds, and Maine's Emergency Management Director, who was also Portland's fire chief, and a remarkable homeless man who was living in a tent up by 295 named Billy Wolverton. Number 2, Meeting Place. It was an Our Town project from the NEA, but our neighborhoods and our neighborhood associations have the tremendous potential to transform lives and landscapes with the residents that live in those neighborhoods. But like they do, and all of us do all over the country, there's a real struggle to have the membership of the association at all accurately reflect the actual diversity in their neighbors. And so we lose relationships, we lose a vibrancy, we lose a resiliency. In Chicago, during a massive heat wave that killed thousands of people, they did a major study of 2 neighborhoods right next to each other with a tremendous amount of shared similar factors. One, almost 1,000 people died, the other one, almost no one, during the same heat wave. And they mapped the connections and the relationships in that neighborhood that caused the difference. So here we are, 4 key neighborhoods in Portland signed on to meet every month uniquely for a year in an arts-based civic dialogue to raise skill sets, to do outreach. And so we did choral singing to increase leadership and fellowship skills. We did drumming to help people cross borders, right? And then in the end, we had 4 very unique citywide community celebrations in each of the neighborhoods, each with a major different art form and artist working with them. Over the last 7 years, I've got to work with over 75 amazing and remarkable artists here in southern Maine. The last project, it's called Forest City Times, after a very controversial police shooting death of a man. Students, high school students predominantly, there was escalating tensions where high school students were over 15 incidents throwing rocks and bottles at the police and at city workers. The police chief, realizing that we were going to be looking at even worse things happening very soon if that continued, wanted to build a bridge and called me and asked, would I consider writing a play, interviewing the officers, and have the officers do a play for the high schools? And I said, wow, yes, except I'm not really here to do PR for the police, so I would need your agreement to work with the officers more likely to cross a line in the wrong direction. And we negotiated, and permission was given. And so I got to at least interview those officers, even though they didn't end up being in the play itself. And the officers' play was called Radio Calls, and one play became two. The second play was 9 African-born immigrant and refugee high school students, with the help of Maine Inside Out, did a production called The Weeping City, which was about their relationship to the police here in Portland. We did it at all 3 high schools for over 1,000 students at the public library, and in the months that followed, officers reported scores of what they call youth-initiated positive engagement. Where young people, instead of running the other way, and who wouldn't, actually came over and introduced themselves and said, hey, I saw the play, hey, my cousin saw the play, hey, were you in that play? At a debriefing, you got to use the language of the people you're working with, right? At a debriefing, after the performance, with the students, we went around the table, and every single participant said that this project their involvement had changed their lives forever. I had the kind of backwards benefit of a very tough childhood. I like to say, I didn't speak till I was 3, not anything, no nothing. And I like to say it's because I didn't know how to say, do you have child protective services in this country? But I was in there, and my aha came very early. I remember being in diapers, really. I remember I could walk fairly reliably. And my mom walked into the room in a super blue, funk fierce mood. And for some reason, I reached down and grabbed up a small yellow wastebasket, turned it upside down on my head, and did like a little soft shoe. And she stopped in her tracks and cracked up laughing. And I thought, wow, this stuff's powerful. This stuff that I now call creativity. Part of my job, as I define it, is to figure out what projects to tackle, what non-arts-based projects in municipal government and in the communities make sense to tackle. And really early on when I got here, I learned that the police department was experiencing historic low morale. And that is a very expensive problem for a city to have, for the officers and their families, for the department, for the city, and for the most vulnerable residents as well. It seemed very risky to make working with the police one of the first projects, especially with national media making brutally clear, even to today and through today, the levels and kinds of dramatic transformation that need to happen within police departments around the country. But it also seemed very promising. It seemed like if I was really serious about trying to see if this idea was going to work, that would be a place. And the kind of brutal honesty that poetry insists on seemed like a good match. So after about a year of building relationships, very important, listen. I got up the courage to make a direct pitch at a roll call in the police department. And you're very conscious of, crossing borders. And it was already a tough equation, made only the tougher because my experiences with the police growing up had actually been very tough. But so there I am, I walk in, I sit in the back, and the first 10 minutes was kind of like crime updates. It makes a lot of sense, and it's a very powerful thing to actually learn what the police are dealing with. And then the sergeant at arms goes, Sergeant Hayden, I believe you have a poem. And sure enough, this guy gets up and walks to the front of the room and slowly pulls the paper out of his hand, smooths it off, and begins. The sky is blue, the ocean's blue. My cruiser's blue, my uniform's blue. Silence. Then he moves on to the chorus. My balls are blue. My balls are blue. My balls are blue. My balls are blue. Now, I was in construction for 20 years. Usually I was the only woman on the job, so I knew when it was my turn to take the roll call stage. I quickly referenced warrior poets and Beowulf, which I actually know nothing about, and then moved on to say the poem was actually very impressive, but I thought the chorus could use some work. The following week, I was sitting with the command staff in a conference room where they were going to make a final decision about doing the project or not doing the project, and a lieutenant there captured it perfectly when he said, Marty, I got to be honest with you. I would rather be fighting 4 guys in the yard by myself than write a poem. A few months after the first poetry calendar was published, 83% of the officers involved said that it had increased their morale. They also reported scores of citizens and residents approaching them and asking them if they'd written a poem, if they knew where to get the poetry calendar, and saying they'd never had any idea what it was like to be a police officer. And it took 3 months. I forbade the poets to even mention the concept of poetry reading to the officers because I knew they would not even write a poem if they knew that might come. But 3 months later, they agreed because in part we were trying to raise money for an officer who had died. And what we're about to see now is our roll call poet reading his 3rd poem he's ever written.
All right, the poem's entitled Jenny and I. A complainant hears a scream, then silence. I speak to Mom in the kitchen. Nothing's going on. Jenny stands in her crib, brown curly hair, solid brown eyes, quiet. Dave carries Jenny to the kitchen, her cheek pressed to his shield. Look at this. 4 red lines blaze on her cheek and neck. We can see the handprint, only the thumb is missing. I look at Mom. Want to try again? She wouldn't stop. An ambulance ride, caseworkers from the state en route. In the ER, all gather around Jenny. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, child protective. Minutes pass by, then a gasp. Oh no, officer, come look. Bare skin on her back exposed. 4 curls of flesh like her wisps of hair. Raw, tender, a bloody bite. Mom has left her mark on Jenny. I look around the room. Tears spill from those gathered around her. Mom cries the most. As I lead her away, Jenny's eyes are brown, solid, no tears. My 18 years, wearing camo then blue. Her 18 months, wearing black and blue. Jenny and I have learned, we cry inside.
What does it mean for a police force and their citizens to see each other in such a radically different light? How does it affect a resident to know that their police officers have written a poem? Art at work is an idea, it's a practice, it's a methodology, it's an experiment. It has been used, the ideas are being used in Portland and Holyoke and Hollowell and London and Broward County and Minneapolis and Los Angeles. When we make art, we're smarter. I've watched it happen in thousands of people over the decades. I've been a theater artist and activist. We're smarter, we can work better together. We're more willing and able to hold contradictions and come up with complex challenges. I've watched people in the risk of just making a simple word poem face such fear that fear ends up making them able better to come up with never before thought of ideas. Ideas that can change the way things look in our future, the kinds of ideas that you have in your minds, the ideas that shift the bones of the world. So I invite you to think about what creative engagement would look like in your communities, in your workplace, in your lives, and then snatch up your own wastebasket, whatever the color is, and join me in putting creativity to work.